We reverse gazumped a greedy landlord. And it was glorious. Gazumping occurs when an agent or seller accepts an offer you make to buy a property at an agreed price, but the property is sold to someone else. This usually happens when the vendor sells the property for a higher amount. This happened 15 years ago, and it is one of the proudest moments of my life. My best friend and her husband have 5 kids together. They lived in an expensive city and rented an old 4-bedroom house for $400 per week. The house was very rundown, with a disgusting kitchen and stinky drains, but it was all they could afford at the time. Still, they made it work. The owner was a nice old lady who was extremely wealthy and very fond of my friend. She froze the rent for 5 years and promised to let them buy the house once they had saved enough to get a loan from the bank. As she had helped other people in a similar way, they knew they could trust her, and so they saved every cent they could. It took them 5 years, but they finally told her they were ready. 2 days later, the nice old lady passed away, before anything was put in writing. Enter the new owners. The lady's 4 children. Each of them was extremely wealthy in their own right. They inherited a huge portfolio of properties. When they first spoke to my friends, they assured them that the sale would still go through, but they'd have to wait until probate was settled. Confident, my friends started making some changes to the place. They stripped wallpaper, started painting, and made plans. Finally, probate was settled, and the owners agreed to go ahead with the sale for the previously agreed price. My friends applied for the loan, but to their shock, it was refused. The owners had raised the asking price by $80,000 without telling my friends, and to make it worse, the house would be put on the open market. In 7 days, there would be an open house, and with the market the way it was, it would probably sell immediately. My friends were devastated. They might have been able to borrow the full amount, but getting the money would take longer than a week. And to make matters worse, property prices had soared recently, and rent had gone up a lot, while theirs had been frozen. Not only were they going to struggle to get the money, but if the house was sold to someone else, and they were asked for a higher rent, or evicted, it would be nearly impossible to find another place with more than 2 bedrooms they could afford. I was scared for my friends, but I was also incandescently angry. Those greedy sods were some of the wealthiest people in the city, and they were screwing over a struggling family for less than $20,000 each. They didn't need the money. It was pure greed, and it was obvious they had always planned to do this. So, while my friends scrambled to come up with the money, I started plotting. I looked up advice on what helps to make a house sale. We needed to make the place as undesirable as possible, without making my friends look like bad tenants. Uncluttered, we moved all the furniture in from the walls, added some extra furniture, borrowed some ornaments, and hung a bunch of motorcycle memorabilia on the walls. The place felt smaller, smelled. My friend boiled a head of cabbage on the stove, and we sprayed ammonia around the front and back doors. It smelled like every cat in the neighborhood had marked its territory. We also poured 2 dozen rotten eggs down the drain to make it smell like sewer gas. We got a moldy old couch and dumped it in the neighbor's front yard, with their permission, of course. We called friends with loud, crappy cars and asked them to do a few laps in front of the block during the open day. The street was unusually busy that day. Everyone we knew found a reason to drive by. It was practically rush hour. We called our mates from the rugby club. Full contact football without the padding. A big part of our club are very large men. The next door neighbor set up a barbecue in their front yard, and we offered free food and cheap beer. The guys came on motorcycles, wearing their roughest gear. There was quite a crowd. A lot of people showed up for the open day. Quite a few were in and out within minutes. One lady sat in her car and watched the party next door, then just drove away. The one bloke who stayed long enough to ask questions spoke to someone walking out of the party. He asked if they were often around and was told, every couple of weeks or so, we have an after-party morning. The actual party was 3 doors up last night. That same party goer also helpfully mentioned that the drains get blocked by tree roots and stink up the place all the time. The potential buyer left without making an offer, so my friends were the only ones to make an offer. They still had to pay more than they had originally planned, but not as much as the greedy owners wanted. My friends signed the papers and paid the deposit that day. So when the brave buyer came back and offered $30,000 more than my friends, it was too late. Thanks to strict anti-gazumping laws, there was nothing the owners could do about it. I would have loved to see their faces when they found out. For all the people saying they had cheap rent, they didn't. $400 was the rent in 2004, and that was considered high back then. By the time the old lady passed away, Average rent for a house that size had only gone up by about $40. Nowadays, 4-bedroom houses in that area go for around $800 per week.